relax, grab a coffee, some popcorn. This one is going to be...
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the fifth installment, big number 5, for Behind the Politics. I am your host, Ben Krause, and I'm joined by Shada today. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing absolutely fantastic. It's a beautiful day out today.
It really is.
It really is. I mean, we're in different states, but,
Yeah.
but overall, beautiful day out today.
Yes.
So if it is your first time joining us, how we do this is we go through a news briefing with COVID news, election news, international news, sometimes some political TikTok news inside of that. And then we move on to a story of the week, this week being the debate and the recent news about Trump's COVID. So that's going to be interesting to talk about. And then we go into an interview this week is with Nyla about feminism. So diving right into some COVID news, the United States has now passed 7.3 million cases and 207,000 deaths. Worldwide, we have 34.1 million cases with 1.02 million deaths. CEO Albert Bourla, head of Pfizer, one of the drug makers for COVID-19 vaccine, told his employees that he would be disappointed that the vaccine work is becoming politicized. Bourla says that the company is, quote, moving at the speed of science, end quote. Bourla wrote that he was unsure when the vaccine would go out to the American families or if it would even be approved by the FDA. Top officials say that the vaccines won't reach the hands of the public until mid-2021. On to some election news. Following the debate, some post-debate polling. When asked the question who won, 48% of people said Biden, 41% said Trump, and 10% said it was a tie. When asked, did you have an improved opinion of the candidate, 38% of people said that their opinion was improved for Biden and 24% for Trump. Financial Times election predictions reported that the last update was October 1st, 2020. It predicted that Biden would receive 279 electoral votes compared to 125 for Trump, not including 134 potential electoral votes that are toss-ups. Post-election, Biden has an increased probability of winning in the majority of these key battleground states, including notable ones such as Florida, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Arizona. Moving on to some international news, following up on the story on Alexei Navalny, he personally believes that Vladimir Putin was behind the poisoning. The context of the story was Navalny was mysteriously poisoned on August 20th when he was returning to Moscow from Siberia. He was poisoned by a nerve agent called the Novichok, which was a poison used by the Soviets. He was then put into a hospital in Germany, and he was in a coma before finally leaving the hospital late last month. Navalny claims that the Soviet-era nerve agent was orchestrated by Russian intelligence agencies, that only Putin can instruct them to use the poison. Putin denies this and even suggests that Navalny could have poisoned himself. This will be a story that we will have to watch for. Now we can finally get into the story of the week, which is the debate. And there were a couple standout moments for both candidates. Do you want to start with some standout moments for Biden?
Yeah, sure. One of the standout moments that a lot of people took notice of was the mention of Beau Biden, Joe Biden's son, and also the mention of Hunter Biden, Joe Biden's son, who struggled with a cocaine addiction. And Biden mentioned, quote, my son, like a lot of people, at home, had a drug problem. He's fixed it. He's worked on it, and I'm proud of him. I'm proud of my son, end quote. This was an extremely humanizing moment for Biden, as many Americans have struggled or are close to someone who has struggled with substance abuse. When Trump was asked to condemn white supremacist militia groups, President Trump initially responded with, quote, sure, I'm prepared to do that, but I would say almost everything I see is from the left wing, not from the right wing. If you look, I'm willing to do anything. I want to see peace, end quote. Biden then asked Trump to denounce these groups, and specifically the Proud Boys, a far-right militia. Trump said, quote, Proud Boys, stand back and stand by. But I'll tell you what, somebody's got to do something about Antifa and the left, because this is not a right-wing problem. This is a left-wing problem, end quote. This was, of course, very problematic to many people, as it was a deflection of the question, and it seemed to many people as Trump not wanting to condemn white supremacist groups.
Yeah, and we saw afterwards with the Proud Boys, they ended up tweeting out that they were, it's almost like Trump was congratulating them, and they were super happy about it. They were stoked, which I think should be kind of scary for some people. that the
Yeah,
Proud Boys,
absolutely.
although maybe not strictly white supremacist group, they are, I would say, a far right militia,
Yeah.
and to have them be happy and kind of celebrate this whole thing should be kind of scary to the average citizen.
Yeah,
And what you said about like Hunter's addiction, it was a really humanizing moment for Biden. He really could connect with people because there's a lot of drug problems in America. It's one of the problems that we really need to fix. And
absolutely.
to see him talk about something so close to him and to actually say that he's gone through it, he's worked through it. It is really humanizing, and it really appeals to the people that have had drug problems in their home. So I think that was something that Biden did very well.
Yeah, I agree. And I think something that Biden did a really great job of was turning to the camera and specifically having that conversation with the American people. He did a great job of doing that. And I think it allowed for people to connect with him more and connect with his stories more.
And this is something that the DNC and Joe Biden have been pushing for throughout his campaign. They've been
Yeah.
pushing the fact that they basically pushed the narrative that Trump is not pro-America, he's pro-Donald Trump's America.
Right.
So they're pushing this narrative even more with yes, he's looking into the camera, talking to all of America.
Right.
They're pushing the fact that he's bipartisan. That's where I think he can win the election. If he keeps
Yeah.
preaching this bipartisanship and he ultimately follows through with his bipartisanship, that's where he can win the election. Because I've been saying this for weeks. The moderate Republican vote is who is going to decide the election.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's either the moderate Republicans are going to go for Trump or they're going to go for Biden. And that is really key. And Trump making these comments towards Trump's America and then Biden making these comments kind of towards America as a whole and preaching bipartisanship should appeal to those moderate Republicans, in my opinion. So I think that's the DNC is really capitalizing on this, and I think it's a net positive for Biden.
Yeah, I agree, and I guess we'll just wait to see what happens in the next few debates with that.
Yeah, and I mean we'll get into it further, but the next couple of debates might not even happen because of Trump's COVID. Well, we'll get into that in a little bit.
Right.
But I'd like to talk about some standout moments for Trump. And I think we can all agree, anybody pro-Trump or anti-Trump, the beginning portion about the Supreme Court was very bad for Biden.
Yes.
Because Biden was unable to confirm whether or not he supported the action of court packing. And this is not like he dodged the question, as a lot of people would say. He didn't give a straight answer, which we could see the entire night. But the whole Supreme Court section really did not go in Biden's favor at all. He just to some Americans he might have seemed ill-informed. To some Americans he might have seen as a liar. But he also in this section tossed around some words such as "Will you shut up, man?" Not the kindest of words, which is it just was not a great area.
It was a really messy segment.
It was a very messy segment, which you could see throughout the entire little spiel.
Yeah, I agree.
So I would say that was the big standout moment for Trump is that whole Supreme Court section. Because and every other kind of section I'd say was pretty 50-50, maybe even. But definitely that one part is where I'd be like, wow, Trump is destroying him. And then when, like we said, when he went to the white supremacist groups and the addiction part, I'd be like, wow, Biden is destroying him. But and then I'd also like to comment on people saying that Donald Trump actually did condemn white supremacy groups.
Right, yeah.
So they bring up the word sure because he did say sure, and they said sure, I'm prepared to do that. And in my opinion, I don't know about other people, but that's not a straight answer of saying I condemn white supremacist groups. And it's not necessarily the fact of, oh, has he done it in the past? Has he condemned white supremacist groups in the past? I don't care if he has. The whole thing, the fact of the matter is, this is the biggest audience he has been talking to since his inauguration. And the fact that he has that many people watching And the fact that he failed to say the words, "Yes, I condemn white supremacy," that's terrifying.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
that's bad for Biden.
Yeah, and I think
Or good for Biden.
one of the bigger things also is telling them to stand back and stand by. Not only is it a deflection, but it's like a lot of people are left thinking, well, what does that mean? What does
Yeah.
stand by mean?
Yeah, and it's actually stand back and stand by is actually a military term,
Right.
and to my knowledge, it means to await orders. So, do I think he meant it in that way? Not at all. I don't think he meant it in you should await orders, but in a military sense, being the law and order guy that he is, I think he definitely knew that that's an underlying tone that could be said.
Right, and how it could have been perceived potentially by these groups.
Yes. So now we can so there was kind of 5 major parts of this debate. First, it was the Supreme Court, then the economy, then race and protests. I would say is one group, and then COVID and the integrity of the election. Yeah. So, is there any kind of spot you want to start at?
Well, I guess we could look at COVID. That was a huge part of the debate, and obviously a huge part of what Biden's platform is kind of running off of. And a standout quote, I think, for me from Biden was when he said that Trump should fund what needs to be funded and focus on the American people rather than trying to divide everybody. And Trump, I noticed, talked a lot about potential vaccines for the virus. There wasn't really much going on other than saying that Biden would have potentially done worse. And yeah, that's what I noticed about that segment.
Yeah. The whole thing about the COVID section for me was one of them. They both acknowledged the existence of COVID, which I think is something correct. There is COVID, but it's just the way that they addressed it after that. Trump was addressing it in the sense that we've already really dealt with it, and we already have a vaccine that we're going to push out. And Biden was pushing the fact that no, we're just getting started with COVID, and we really need to crack down in order to stop it. And I guess this is a good little funnel point to follow up. Is that Trump? I think was it the day after, 2 days after he
2 days after, yeah.
2 days after he got tested positive for the coronavirus. So it's really weird to see that he basically said that COVID was almost over and that they all had it all under control, and then he tested positive for the virus, which is really interesting to me.
It's very ironic.
Yeah, it's ironic, and it's just such a coincidental timing for that to happen. And there's a lot of Republicans that have now tested positive for corona. So it is getting widespread about the White House, which is one reason that he got sent to the hospital that he got sent to. And so I guess next we can move on to, I thought, a big pivotal point for Biden was about the race and protests, which is where the white supremacy sort of thing like fell.
Yeah.
So, do you have any comments on what Biden brought to the race and protest section?
Well, I think he approached it with more of a reconciliation type of stance, where his main point was pushing through that we should be reconciling divided communities, whereas it seems that to Biden, it seems that Trump is dividing them, or at least that's what he mentioned. That's basically it.
Yeah, and like we've seen with the RNC and Trump, he's continuing to push this narrative that he is the law and order president.
Yeah.
He made it known a lot during the debate that he is a law and order president, and he actually ended up pointing out to Joe Biden, he's like, yeah, if you're so pro law enforcement, why do you not have any law enforcement groups supporting you? And that's one thing that Trump was like, that was a good point for him. He didn't have any. Biden, I don't think, has any major law enforcement groups endorsing him. Right. But at the same time, Joe Biden did say, I support law enforcement, which is also important for him to say. So I definitely, and then of course the white supremacy thing happening in there.
Yeah.
It was a fumble in that area.
I think that might have stole the show for that segment.
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure.
Yeah.
I guess we can go back to the economy.
Yes.
So the economy. Trump is known for preaching his economy,
right.
and he definitely did so in the debate. He said that his economy was booming, everything about his economy was perfect, and that they're now making a V-shaped recovery.
Yeah.
That's important, a V-shaped recovery, meaning that just as fast as it went down, it's just as quickly coming back up.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure Biden basically said that it was actually at like a K, I'm pretty sure is what he said.
Yeah.
He said it was a K-shaped recovery. And he also said, quote, "You can't fix the economy until you fix the COVID crisis," end quote. Which is also something very interesting that he brought into it. Because Trump, of course, closed the economy earlier in the year. And yeah, Biden does not think that COVID is done with.
Yes.
And Trump does. So I think, and any other takeaways from the economy portion of the debate?
Yeah. Well, I found that Biden, again, he turned and he focused on having that conversation with the American people, saying, quote, "Millionaires and billionaires like Donald Trump in the middle of the COVID crisis have done very well," end quote, describing Trump's tax proposals as being profligate. So that was, I think, something that could have potentially resonated with a lot of people, especially now during this COVID crisis, where we've seen like this economic recession and a lot of people who are out of jobs and middle to lower class families are struggling. So I think that could have been something that resonated with a lot of people.
Yeah. And I think another thing that we all knew Biden was going to talk about was Trump's tax returns.
Yep.
He brought it up. He brought it up in the in this part. And Trump's response was, quote, "You will see the tax returns when they're finished."
Right.
So this is something that Hillary Clinton has been asking for since the last election. Hillary was like, "I need to see your tax returns. Like, I need them." And then I think he had the same response. "You'll see them when they're finished." Or he made the statement, "I've done nothing wrong." So I think now we just got to wait to see if he really did use loopholes or if he legitimately just didn't pay his taxes.
Right.
So it'll be interesting to see that. And then we already kind of went through the Supreme Court about Donald Trump's appointee. Biden ended up talking about the Affordable Care Act. So yeah, we already kind of went through the Supreme Court. I think we could have a whole episode on this, just the integrity of the election as a whole.
Yes, agreed.
Do you have any like comments about the integrity of the election?
Well, obviously, the main point that they were talking about during that segment was the mail-in ballots and whether or not they could lead to a fraudulent election. Trump obviously is very much against these mail-in ballots because he does believe that there could be fraud involved with those. And Biden, again, he encourages voting by any means, including the mail-in ballots, saying, quote, "He cannot stop you from being able to determine the outcome of this election," end quote. So obviously that was kind of the main points being mentioned during that segment.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure when he was saying this, again, he turned to the camera, he pointed at the camera and said, "You need to vote by any means possible. Like, you need to vote." So I think that's another point with like the bipartisanship and the holistic America, you know?
Yeah.
So and Trump has been against these mail-in ballots for a while. And he thinks that there is kind of widespread fraud that happens with mail-in ballots, which I simply don't think is true. You can think it's true all you want, but I don't think there's widespread fraud in mail-in elections. The one thing that I'm concerned about is whether or not he will send mail-in ballots to the Supreme Court to see if it's deemed unconstitutional. Because the voting is happening after Election Day, which can be seen as unconstitutional in some senses. And it can be seen as unconstitutional just like the function, the structure of the mail-in system. But it'll be interesting to see if Trump puts these mail-in ballots on the Supreme Court and whether or not it's deemed unconstitutional or constitutional.
Yeah, I agree. And obviously, this is something that a lot of people are wondering about because with COVID, there are certain people who won't be able to leave their houses and go to the polls and vote on election day. And so their only way of voting is through these mail-in ballots. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens with that. Definitely something to and keep up with.
Agreed. So I guess that we can go into more of COVID's into more of Trump's COVID. So it was, I think it was Hope Hick, right, that he contracted it from, or that it's allegedly that he contracted it from. But so yes, Trump has fallen ill of COVID, and at first they said that he had mild symptoms. Now he was sent to the Walter Reed National Military Medical Center, which is where all the presidents go and military personnel go.
Yeah.
For they say right now it's just so he can be isolated away from people. We'll wait to see if he's actually having real symptoms or real troubling symptoms.
Yeah.
But for right now, all we know is that he's in the hospital with COVID. Him and his wife both have COVID, and so yeah, that's all we know. And we also know that Biden and his wife tested negative for COVID.
Right. Yeah.
So
yeah.
that's what we know.
Yeah, it was really interesting to see that the Biden campaign actually figured out that the Trump campaign was dealing with COVID through the news. So that was something that was really interesting.
Yeah. Agreed.
Yeah.
So I guess to summarize, major points of the election were that nobody won and only America lost. It was a wreck. It really was just two kindergartners having an argument over who wants the last donut.
Right.
And,
right.
And yeah. So that's all we have for the story of the week. It was great having you on. And,
thanks for having me.
Welcome to the interview portion of the podcast. I'm joined here with Nyla. How are you doing today?
Doing pretty good.
Yeah, no, it's been an interesting day for political TikTok. We won't get into it now, but it's been an interesting day. But so before we get into the depth of this interview, which is feminism, we just have to ask you the corny questions about politics and stuff. So how did you get into politics?
I think this is kind of like a crazy story because it wasn't one thing where it was like one thing happened and all of a sudden I decided like, oh yeah, this is what I like. It was kind of gradual. So like starting probably like the beginning of high school when I joined like Model Congress and stuff, but I wasn't like as into it as I am now. I think the thing that like really pushed me over the edge was, like starting to talk about politics with like a lot of the people that I go to school with, because I live in like a super conservative, super Trump supporter town. So I feel like after talking to a bunch of people from my school and getting to like kind of debates with people from my school, I kind of delved deeper into it because I wanted to know more so that I could, bring actual like facts to the table.
So basically what you're saying is you got into politics to refute the people at your school.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah. Sweet. So how did you get into political TikTok specifically?
I used to be like scared of posting my political content on my main. So I joined a Zoom debate on some random girl's Zoom. I honestly forget what it was. And I basically met a bunch of people through there and we created our own group account, which I'm no longer a part of. But we created our own group account. And then once I was like posting like, a lot on that account, I joined the pro-choice hype house and, I was learning from the people around me. I kept joining like Oliver's Zooms and stuff. And then that kind of pushed me into being like, you know what, I should post political content on my main. And, just from there, I just,
Yeah, for sure. So now we can kind of get into the depth of this interview, which is feminism. So could you give like just a baseline definition of feminism for the people that don't necessarily know what feminism is?
Yeah, sure. Feminism is basically just advocating for the equality of the sexes.
Awesome. And do you think that there's a lot of misconceptions with that definition?
Most definitely. I have a lot of people coming to me saying like, they support women and men being equal, but feminism is like pushing for women being more than men, or something along that basis. And I think that like that's kind of where it gets misconstrued because people don't actually, look into it once they kind of think that it's all about women being better than men.
Yeah. So I guess what does it mean to you to be a feminist?
Um, I think being a feminist isn't just saying like, yeah, women and men should be equal. Like, I mean, I would hope that most people would think that. But I think being a feminist is like about donating or like sharing things to actually contribute to the movement, going to protests or whatever. And I know like not a lot of people can donate, like, people don't have a lot of money or whatever, but like whatever you can do to like support the movement and try to like get the word out there, I think that that is really what's going to help in the end.
Yeah, and some people think that to be a feminist, you have to be a female. Can you think? Do you think you can be a male feminist?
100%. Yeah, it's like I said, it's like even men, feminism also aims for males to have equality. Like there are a lot of things, there are a lot of like social issues, kind of going around men and what their roles should be and women and what their roles should be. So I think, whatever gender you are, it it's something that everyone can, come together on.
So basically, what I'm hearing is feminism isn't necessarily just about women's rights. It's about the equality of women and men.
Yes, most definitely.
Okay. So why do you think this term has been twisted or changed into what you said earlier?
Well, I think that kind of goes into the different waves of feminism, and I think like that's kind of where it gets a little confusing because it starts with like first and second wave feminism, which is kind of like it's easy to understand. Like first wave feminism is like, um you want equality for like the laws and stuff because the laws were super unequal. But once it gets to kind of society, I feel like that's when it gets a little confusing for people. So like third wave feminism technically is kind of mm, kind of misunderstood just because there's not a set definition, as it was with like laws. Since it's societal, it's a little more difficult. So
Yeah. So could you elaborate on what third wave feminism is trying to achieve?
basically third wave feminism is, just trying to abolish the patriarchy, try to get rid of these standards for men and women. And it also has been revolving around the whole Me Too movement with the rape accusations and stuff, which is probably why people think that it's women versus men and not something that all of us can come together for.
Yeah, and we kind of hit on so what are the most popular misconceptions? Because we talked that there are misconceptions, but what are the most popular misconceptions? We can kind of dive deeper into those and maybe their fallacies.
I think the most popular one is definitely when people say that it's not needed because they think that equality of the sexes is based off of the state and based off of laws, kind of, and based off of like direct things that may affect women or may affect men.
And what would your rebuttal for that be? Like why do you think it's important to have third wave feminism because of that issue?
Um, well, I mean, there's different sides to everything. So, I mean, I'd say starting off, if someone said that it wasn't needed, I would probably just start with the fact that going by the basic definition of feminism, it doesn't really say that it needs to be needed. Like advocating for something is just, supporting it. So I think like everyone should support the equality of the sexes. But also, like I said, it goes into societal things. So like such as like human trafficking, like rape cases, like crimes, how it's like men get incarcerated more than women, men commit more crimes. It all kind of builds into this whole societal structure thing.
Yeah. And I guess another question I would ask you is do we see more feminists nowadays with Gen Z than we have in the past? Not necessarily like first wave feminism, but like in the last decade, do you think the younger generation has been leaning more towards feminist ideals?
Um, I think Generation Z is kind of more I don't want to say kind of more woke. like I feel like now this especially this year with everything that has been going on, I feel like this is our generation is the generation to like open our eyes and like actually look at the things that are going wrong in the world. And I definitely think that this year especially more people are becoming feminists and more people are speaking out about injustices in the world.
And are there certain like points that we can contribute that to? Like I know specifically I would point that to Ruth Bader Ginsburg passing away, but are there any other like key points that can contribute to this generation being as you said, quote unquote, woke?
I think definitely I think Trump was a big one with him getting elected, and I think that was kind of a whole war with the feminist movement not liking Trump and his administration. Um, but yeah, I definitely think that the death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg has contributed largely to this, as you know, people are worried about abortion becoming illegal and like Roe v. Wade being overturned.
And do you think in these next couple weeks, months, leading up to the election and appointees of the Supreme Court, do you think there's going to be more feminist marches, more people coming out and saying that they are a feminist because of the recent tragedy and loss of Ruth Bader Ginsburg?
Definitely. I think it all kind of starts with the Women's March. That's the first kind of recognition of everything. And I feel like if you were like split on Biden versus Trump or whatever, I feel like this is the time where most pro-choicers come together and we're like, okay, this is such a tragic thing. Trump is trying to fill the seat with someone who is going to have Roe v. Wade overturned, and this is kind of going to bring people together more.
Yeah. And I was actually going to ask about the Women's March on October 17th. So could you explain a little bit about like what this march is trying to do and where it is happening?
I am going to the Women's March in DC on the 17th. I'm pretty sure that there are other locations, but I'm not sure where they are. But since I live kind of in the area, I'll be going to the DC one. But basically, this is about Ruth Bader Ginsburg. So all the feminists, you know, we're gonna come together and protest basically how Trump, you know, right after she died was like talking about, you know, fill that seat, like trying to already appoint someone different when, if you compare it to like 2016, he was opposed of when Obama wasn't supposed to appoint a new justice.
Yeah, so do you think if Amy Coney Barrett does get the seat, Roe v. Wade would be overturned or would be brought up to the Supreme Court?
I think it's definitely a large possibility. Um, Sometimes things can get a little confusing with the government and like the Supreme Court and what they can do versus what they cannot do, as you know, it was protected by the Constitution. But if you have the Supreme Court and they do overturn it, I don't think there would be much that we could do.
Yeah. And I don't know if you touched on this, but is this Women's March happening all over the country? Is it just specifically in DC? Like, how can other people get involved?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure there are different locations. I'd have to check again since I was looking at this a couple of days ago. But I know because I'm in the area, usually a lot of like things that I go to, like marches and stuff, happen in DC since I just like live over here. But I'm pretty sure there are other ones that are around, that are across the country.
Yeah. And have you seen these recent events with the marches, the death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg? Do you think this is bringing Gen Z together and have the common goal and bond of this kind of feminist ideals?
Yeah, I definitely think that this is this is bringing people together, not just our generation, but I think it's kind of bringing together all feminists of all ages, of whatever generation. It's kind of, causing people to come together. It reminds me of like the BLM protests, where it didn't matter, what your race was or whatever, but you come together for a certain thing that that you have in common with someone else.
Yeah. So it seems like that these ideas of feminism are more prevalent in our time, even over first wave feminism. So why would you say that other times we didn't see this popularity, but now we do? Specifically, widespread popularity between men, women, and all the like.
I think it's part of the reason that, like, after first and second wave feminism, we've had different mindsets, going into things. So, for example, if you like went all the way back to like the 1800s, obviously our generations have much different ideals as theirs. So over time, after these movements have already happened, after the first two movements have already happened, I think everyone has kind of been more open to change, and everyone has has had their opinions changed.
Yeah, and can you contribute that to like technology, specifically like TikTok, Instagram, social media platforms? Do you think that's boosted the popularity of these ideas?
Definitely. I think especially with how, with political TikTok, and like even before that, like political like Instagram or whatever, I think technology has definitely been something to help this movement, because, it's easier to get the word out, and it's easier for people to communicate with other people with similar, political views or not similar political views. And I think it's also easier for people to convert people into like what their opinions are. And I think it's also better because, specifically for political TikTok, even though a bunch of us have, really, really different political views, I notice that like all of us can come together.
Yeah. So we went down this rabbit hole initially talking about the popular misconceptions. And the one that we did talk about was that it quote unquote wasn't needed. Are there any other like popular misconceptions of feminism?
I'd say, other than the fact that people say that it's not needed, people could also say we should we should go back to our traditional values, or they could say, um, the common misconception that they just think that women are better than men.
Yeah. So a misconception that I've been seeing more and more recently is people bringing up the women happiness rate. Can you elaborate and talk on that a little bit?
Sure. So I feel like that misconception comes from the fact that there have been studies that have been done that show the rate of women's happiness going down, whereas men's happiness rates have stayed the same or gotten better. And there was like a 35-year kind of period where there were a lot of milestones that the feminist movement has hit. For example, like 1974, when Congress outlawed credit discrimination based off of sex, a bunch of different things that were more, state based. So I feel like when people see that, they see like, oh, well, these happiness rates are decreasing. They think automatically that it's automatically because of the feminist movement, and that we're forcing women into these roles of having to like go to work and stuff, which is another misconception, as feminists don't really want to force women into the roles of like working. We just want people, both men and women, to feel comfortable with whatever role that they want to do and whatever they want to do with their lives. But you can also look at like other variables that might have contributed to this while that was all going on. So like there was a rise in incarceration rates among the husbands of these women. There was, which wouldn't affect the man, because they didn't actually include people who were in prison with their happiness rates. But That dropped the U.S. marriage rates by 13%, which could have also, played a role. But at the same time, there are a bunch of different things that women have to go through that may be like damaging. Like, women are twice as likely than men to be diagnosed with depression because, like, there's a bunch of different reasons that could be: hormone changes, pregnancy, postpartum depression or postpartum psychosis, sexual or physical abuse, eating disorders, etc. But I think one of the most popular reasons is because not only are like the roles kind of pushed onto people at home, they're also being kind of pushed onto people in the workplace. So I think with the dual burden, it kind of just stresses people out more. And I think that's a big part of it, is that people think that with these movements is something where it's like we're trying to force a role onto women, we're trying to force a role onto men, when that's not the case.
Yeah, I know that was really well said. You kind of answered all the follow-up questions I was gonna ask.
Oh.
But yeah, no, you're all good. You're all good. But I think that's all the time we have for today. Are there any last words you'd like to share with the audience while you have this platform?
Oh, yeah, sure. Just going back to like the Women's March, I noticed that like a lot of people are going to be going, like a lot of political TikTokers, and I thought that was really exciting. So if you like follow me, or if you like know who I am, or like if you're friends with me or whatever, please let me know if you're going.
Yeah, and we'll put her TikTok in the bio of the YouTube video and the description of the Spotify and Apple podcast.
Cool.
Okay, so thank you for joining us this week, Nyla. It was great talking this week. If you're listening on YouTube, make sure you like, subscribe, and turn on that bell notification to stay updated on the latest episodes. If you're listening on Apple Music, give us a 5-star rating and give us a review. We read all of them. And just a reminder, you can also find this podcast on Spotify. See you all next week, and goodbye, everybody. Behind the Politics is a Verbum production. I'm your host, Ben Krause, and Shada is this week's co-host. The show's producer and editor is Alan Yao. The show's original music is by Tane Try, and special thanks to Dominic and Zach for your research support. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next week.